14, if you want to be opening your Bibles to Luke chapter 14. It is Mother's Day, and I'm confident that there are several here to honor your mother and to be with your mother, and I'm very grateful and thankful for that. I know she is very much, and there are some missing that have no doubt gone to honor their mother in other places, and we are thankful that they are doing that. The Bible is very clear that we are to honor our father and our mother, and what a great way and what a great day to honor mothers. And certainly, I say it every year, it's on the front of the bulletin. I don't know of any value greater than a godly mother. But I also recognize that some of you didn't have that opportunity. And I realize that some of you may be going through the first Mother's Day without your mother. And those are tough and those are trying. And there may be bad memories about your mother. And so a lot of emotions and a lot of things going on in a day where truly I hope it is the case that we can honor our mothers, but perhaps you might be in a different circumstance and setting there, and I hate that. I'll just be quite honest with you. I just decided this year that I would just stick with the parables, and I hope you're okay with that. I'm sure you came expecting me to talk about mothers today, but we're going to talk about the next parable on our schedule from Luke 14, and come Father's Day, I'll mention that and honor our fathers, and we'll move into whatever parable it is for that day, Lord willing. This morning we want to talk about the chief seats versus the cheap seats. I don't know how much you've been involved into going to places and doing things where there were a variety of level of seats, but I've had the opportunity to do that quite a bit. And I'll give you some fun fact trivial that'll mean nothing to you if you're not a Cardinals fan. But if you are, it might mean something. Had the opportunity to go tour Busch Stadium a few years ago. And right behind home plate, there are green seats. Next time you watch a Cardinals game, you might see them for the first time in your life. All the rest of the seats in the stadium are red, right? But there are, I think, maybe 600. That sounds kind of high. But anyway, there are several seats right behind home plate that are green. They are fittingly green because it cost you a lot of green to sit there. And we got to go down there and see them, right? It's pretty cool. And then we got told that one of those seats for the entire year cost you $14,000. And you have to buy two. So do a little simple math here. That's $28,000, right? And when the stadium opened in 2006, you had to commit to a 10-year agreement. So that's $280,000 for 10 years worth of two seats at a ballpark, right? Oh, you got a meal and you got a parking place and all that too, but in 2016 they were going to re-up that, and who knows what it was for the next 10 years. But anyway, the point is there's a seat down there, right? I'm sure it looks good from there. By the way, you have people that walk the aisle that bring you food. You don't have to go get food, right? And so there's a lot of perks that come with that, but they are fittingly the color green because they are the chief seats in the house. We got to go one year, and it was just Chastity and I, and so guess where we sat? Not in the green seats. We sat in the club level seats. That was pretty cool. And we sat in the second level and had a good view, and we had food right behind us and air-conditioned rooms right by. It was, some of you that's been to some of those places, you know what a club level seat is. They're a little bigger, little more padded. That was kind of nice. A couple years later, we took the kids, and guess where they sat? Way up yonder. There's a lot of difference in buying 2 tickets versus buying 5, right? See, I understand the difference between the chief seats and the cheap seats, right? That's what's going on here in our parable for today. Notice in Luke 14 and verse 1, Jesus has been invited to go to a Pharisee's house to eat. And they're watching him very carefully to see if he's going to go, to see what he's going to say, to see how they're going to react. And obviously he was under constant scrutiny all the time, being watched, and all of his moves were being criticized and evaluated. And so they were watching him. But I want you to drop down to verse 7, and I want you to notice that he was watching them. Now, they were watching him as they come into this Pharisee's house to get ready for this dinner that they had been, this feast that they had been invited to. But he was also watching them. And notice what it says in verse 7. He told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they chose the chief seats. Or some translations say the places of honor. Now let's just be honest. If they were going to have a baseball game in Busch Stadium and it was general admission, first come, first serve, people aren't going to go in and say, you know what, I think I want to sit up here where the Livingston family sat that time they come. No, everybody's going to be rushing down to sit in the green seats, right? And when they fill up, the seats around them will start to fill up. And it'll fill in from the bottom to the top, right? There may be a few that jump in those club level seats that are really nice on the second level there, if there weren't any green seats. But the point is, if it was just general admission and you didn't have a ticket with a seat number on it, you and I both know that we're going to go to the best seats in the house. Well, if I understand it correctly, in this culture, in this Pharisee's home, he would have 3 couches sitting in a U shaped. And on each couch, there would be 3 seats. And the one in the middle would be the preferred seat. So in other words, in each U arrangement, you would have 3 preferred seats. Obviously, the couch in the middle of the U would be number 1. And then the one on the right, everything moves to the right, would be number 2. And the one on the left would be number 3. So if we were ranking these 9 seats in order of priority from 1 to 9, seat number 1 would be the couch in the middle of the couch. Seat number 2 would be the middle of the right couch. Seat number 3 would be the middle of the left couch. So you had 3 green seats in this arrangement, if you will. And what was happening is Jesus noticed them coming in is that they were taking the middle seats, right? So if you come up to this U arrangement and the one in the very center was still, that's the one you'd get. And if it wasn't, then you'd take the one on the right or maybe the one on the left. If all the middle seats were gone, then you would want the seat just to the right of the middle seat. So if we were going to label seats 4 through 6, it would be the seat on the right side of the couch in the middle. Seat number 5 would be the right side of the couch on the right. Seat number 6 would be the right side of the couch on the left. And then we do 7, 8, 9 with the left side of each middle going around. And so if I understand the culture correctly, they would understand 1 through 9 the positions of honor. The seats of honor, the chief seats. In other words, if you were on the left side of the left couch, you were number 9. You were up in the 400 level where it takes binoculars to see the field, right? That was your seat, the cheap seat. Whereas the person over there in the middle of couch number 1 would be in the green seat. And Jesus watched as they began to do this. And he noticed that they were taking the places of honor. And so here's the parable. He says, when you're invited by someone to a wedding feast, do not sit down in the place of honor. Could you imagine the irony of someone going in and sitting down on the left side of the left couch? Being the first person in that entire U with 9 choices available, they take position number 9. All the rest of them are still open, but they choose purposely. Jesus says, when you go into a wedding feast, don't sit down in the place of honor, because here's what might happen. Someone more important than you, some translations say someone more distinguished than you, might have been invited. Now you can just stop right there and, let's face it. If you're holding a $14,000 green seat, you know that's your seat, right? If you're holding a $14, 400 level seat, you know that's your seat, right? And so it would be foolish for you to try to take that ticket and go try to sit in a green seat. Because if you are sitting there and someone comes in holding the $14,000 ticket, they're more distinguished than you. Now, it's a money's game, and it's an earthly thing, and it's all material. I get it, but you understand the point. They've paid more for their ticket than you have. And you're going to be forced to get up and give them their seat. Well, now these people are thinking, in this culture, who's more important than me? Right? If we're going to put a dollar value on a ticket for a seat in a ballpark, we get it. But these people are thinking, I've been invited, man. I'm the most important person at the wedding feast. What do you mean somebody's more important than me? How could anybody come in here more distinguished or more honorable than me? See, that's what's going through their minds. They're not thinking about the price of the ticket. They're thinking about the offer of the invitation. And the invitation's been offered to you, and it's been offered to me, and we both get to go to this wedding feast. We got it in the mail. It told us when the date was. It told us when the time was. It told us who was getting married. And all we're thinking is wedding cake, right? And we're going to be there. We're just as important as anybody else there. And so we decide when we get there, we're going to sit at what appears to be the head table. And then, lo and behold, the groom's parents come in. And you're in their seat. Uh-oh. Someone more important, someone more distinguished for that occasion. This is not the value of human beings here. This is the value or the distinction for that occasion. You're at that wedding feast, and the groom's parents come in, and you're in their seat. Now, here's what's going to happen. You are going to get, verse 9, asked to give the groom's parents their place. And what's going to happen is you're going to have to get up and walk to the general seating, and you're going to be really embarrassed. There's going to be shame there, the Bible says in Luke 14 and verse 9. Jesus says rather in this parable in verse 10, when you're invited, go in and sit in the lowest place. And then the host may come to you, and you may be sitting in position 9 there around the U shape of the couch, and all 3 middles aren't filled up. And the host may come and say, you know what, there were some people who couldn't come. Won't you come up here and sit at the middle table? Won't you come up here and sit at the table of honor? I've told this story many times. I love this story. It's my favorite story of all my life. Back when I was at Magnolia Bible College, we used to have benefit dinners every year. And a benefit dinner meant that somebody a whole lot more important than you was coming to speak because they wanted to raise a whole lot more money than what you could give, right? And so they bring somebody important in. So I've got a red, white, and blue tie signed by Lee Greenwood because he was there one year. It's pretty cool. And so as a student, you got to go for free because they knew we didn't have no money. But the student spot was like way back yonder in the back. And it was always funny to me because somewhere during the program they would say, now here's our student body. And we'd all stand up back there in the very, very back. And I'd look around thinking, boy, y'all think a lot of us, don't you? Well, there just so happened to be this year. There was a guy there by the name of Archie Manning. Now, you may not know Archie Manning, but he's got a son named Peyton Manning. You might know him. Archie Manning's a pretty big deal in the state of Mississippi. Archie Manning's there that year, and we're sitting in our seats because that's where we sat, right? And I can't think of what his title name is, the Director of Student Services comes over to our table, and there's about 6 of us sitting there, about 3 or 4 students and their wives. And he says to us, Dee's Oil Company can't come tonight. Would y'all mind moving and sitting in their table? Now, all I had to say was Dee's Oil Company, right? Do I need to say any more to tell you where their table was? I mean, we literally counted the threads on Archie Manning's pants. I mean, it was awesome. It was awesome. Every time he spit, we got hit. I mean, it was that good. It was right there. Man, it was so amazing. They didn't want, the table up in the front to be empty, right? So they come in. This really happened to us. And I'm telling you, I've never been so sinful in pride in all of my life as I walked to that table. Man, I was excited. I mean, we marched up there like we were somebody. And we sat there at that table, and boy, we felt. See, Jesus says when that occurs, there's honor. There's glory that's going to happen then. Don't let it happen the other way around, right? We didn't go in and say, oh no, here's an empty table with Dee's Oil Company on the name. We'll just sit here. We'll let them sit back yonder. No, we didn't do that, right? If we had have done that and they had to come in, what would have happened would have been verse 9. The Director of Student Services would have come up and said, hey, y'all seats are back there. And then that joyful walk up to the front would have been a very shameful walk to the back, right? But when it happened the way that it did, and we were asked to move up, we were asked to move to a higher position. What fun it was. What honor to be able to sit there. And oh, by the way, if I didn't tell you, most of the people were there when this happened. So we got seen by a lot of people, and we were in the center of the stage in a place of honor. Not that we deserved to be there, but we were asked to move up there, just like what happened in verse 10. So Jesus concludes it this way. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted. Now there's the lesson for the parable. He who exalts himself will be humbled. We know of a few of occasions in the Bible where this happened. There was on one occasion in Daniel chapter 4 where King Nebuchadnezzar decided that he would do that. as a process of doing that, God allowed him to dream. And in his dream, he saw a tree, a big tree, a great tree, a massive tree being cut down. And all that was left was a stump. Nebuchadnezzar learned, I'm that tree. A man who had exalted himself, a man who had lifted himself up to a higher standard than what was rightfully his. And God made it very clear through an image that was easy to understand. Daniel chapter 4. I'll cut you down. I'll humble you. Luke 14 and verse 11, he who exalts himself. I think about Herod in Acts chapter 12. And Herod thought that he would just rise up to a power beyond anything else on the earth, and that he would just stomp out and squash Christianity and religion entirely. And God says, I'll take some worms and I'll do away with you. A man who exalted or tried to exalt himself. And God humbled him. Humbled him to the point of not even letting him die an honorable death, a respectable death in Acts chapter 12, eaten by worms. The flip side of that in Luke 14 and verse 11 is that whoever humbles himself will be exalted. I hope tonight you'll come back and we'll just dive into the topic of humility. What a wonderful topic. What a challenging topic. He who humbles himself. The Bible has a lot to say about humility and about the importance of humility and about the value of humility and about God's desire for His people to be humble. Jesus says, He who humbles himself will be exalted. You see, when we look around in our world today, in our culture, let's face it, folks, people like the chief seats. We even pay more money than we might even have sometimes to get a better seat. In the business world, it's all about the chief seats. Let me just illustrate it like this. If you were to go up to any company in the industrial park in Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, and you were to walk in, and the room you walked into, there was this big, round, oval-shaped like table with these big, high-back, padded arm, rolling chairs. I guarantee you, you'd walk in there and say, man, it's a nice janitor's closet. No, you wouldn't. The only time the janitor gets in there is right before a big meeting to clean it. Any other time, the janitor's not allowed. We understand what the chief seats are. I'm not upset at that system. I'm just illustrating the point. We understand where the people of importance sit. And we understand what that looks like. And it's just a part of culture, and it's just a part of society. But here's what I don't want it happening. I don't want it happening in the church. And it can. Galatians 1 and verse 10, Paul says, am I just trying to please man, or am I trying to please God? You see, he understood that if he wasn't careful, he could be trying to get the chief seat in the church just so that he could be somebody important and somebody that people would honor and respect. And he said, I'm not here to please man. If I were trying to please man, I couldn't be a servant of God, Galatians 1 and verse 10. I'm here to please God. Or I think about the mother of the sons of Zebedee, right? In Mark chapter 10, verse 35. Do you realize that by inspiration, the Holy Spirit doesn't even regard her worthy enough to give us her name? I kind of like it. What'd she want? She said, Jesus, could you give one of my sons the right-hand seat and one of my sons the left-hand seat? Could you let one of my boys sit on the right and one on the left? And what's she asking for? She's saying, listen, Jesus, I know you're going to sit in the middle of the couch because that's where you belong. But now, position number 2 would be just to your right. Could you let one of my boys sit there? And position number 3 would be just on your left. Could you let one of my boys sit there? What's she asking for? She's asking for her sons to have a place of preeminence in the kingdom, in the church. And Jesus says, listen, lady, you don't know what you're asking for. Number 1, those are not mine to give. Number 2, I don't think you understand the price that they'll have to pay to sit there. I ain't got a clue what Mr. D's paid for me to sit there, but I'm glad he did. Jesus says, you don't understand what you're asking for. Don't tell me it can't happen in the church, because it has. And it could again. So whoever, Luke 14 and verse 11, whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So what does that look like? Well, I had to get it in here somewhere, so here you go. Have you read Luke 1 lately? Have you looked at the mother of Jesus? Do you hear how, as you read verse 26 to verse 56 and those 31 verses of the angel and the interaction there, and she says, why me? I'm not worthy. I don't deserve. I don't belong. Why have you selected me? It's just oozing with humility. And God is saying through the angel over and over and over, it's exactly why I picked you. This conversation proves exactly the heart of the woman I was looking for to be the mother of my son. And then if it gets any better than that, it'd have to be Jesus himself, right? A man who humbled himself. Did you hear the Bible reading that Kevin read a moment ago, Philippians 2, verse 8? Who being found in the form of man, humbled himself. It says it straight out. He humbled himself and he became obedient to the point of death. But how does that paragraph end? Verse 9. But God has exalted him. Why could God exalt him to a position that every knee and every tongue, every knee bow, every tongue would confess either on earth or on Judgment Day? Why could God exalt his Son to a position and give him a name that is above all other names? The answer, verse 8, he humbled himself. Jesus said in Luke 14 and verse 11, whoever humbles himself will be exalted. There are many, many other examples, either way, of those who exalted themselves or those who humbled themselves, but perhaps it's fitting that we end with Jesus. As much fun and as much deserving as mothers are to be honored, the one we truly honor every day ought to be Jesus. We put him in the chief seat, because that's where he deserves to be. We give him the preeminence and the priority in our lives because that's where he deserves to be. He is exalted above all. Why? Because he showed us the greatest example of humility. He humbled himself. I realized this morning it takes a lot of humility to admit wrong. It takes a lot of humility to admit sin. It takes a lot of humility to admit that I can't get to heaven on my own. I need some help. I'm offering you, through the Lord's invitation, the opportunity to receive the help that He wants to give you to make that possible, do you need to humble yourself that He might exalt you? If so, would you come now as we stand and sing?